Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. You know, the underlying causes of homelessness is something that cannot be quickly resolved or won't go away overnight. This is something that will take, homelessness will take sustained, focused effort in order for us to make headway. We are announcing today that we are establishing the Governor's Leadership Team on Homelessness. It does represent the federal, state, and city level mayor and the council chair, representatives from Senator Hirono and Schatz's office, as well as representing the state legislature chairs Luke and Tokuda, because we really believe it will require a focused effort on all fronts, federal, state, and county, to make significant efforts. We do expect that this team will be meeting on a weekly basis, looking to take positive action to move forward. You know, there has been many different people concerned with homelessness all across the state. We do believe that this council will provide us with a way to look at different options that can make improvement on the homeless situation. You know, at the same time, be able to look at alternatives and then get understand what the resources and actions required, and then make decisions about whether it would allow us to move forward on the homelessness issue. We will be looking at state assets, county assets, as well as federal, in order to allow us to move forward in the most meaningful way. You know, we believe this is unprecedented, and the first time that we're getting leadership from state, federal, and city to be focused and coordinated. We'll be working and committed to work together in the best way possible to move forward on homelessness. But we want to make clear that there's no quick fixes on homelessness. You know, there's no easy answer. We do understand that as you enforce in one area, they move to those areas that are there's no enforcement. And so we want to be thoughtful in how we move forward, but we want to be focused in identifying opportunities and making decisions that will help with the homeless situation.
You want to have state guys go first? I want to thank the governor for bringing us all around one table to talk about tackling the very difficult, complex problem of homelessness. And it's great for the first time in my administration that we have our federal partners, our state partners, and our city partners all working together to deal with the issue. The way I see it as mayor is we're good at enforcement. You know, we have the compassionate disruption and we are housing people, but we have huge challenges in terms of finding more housing for these folks. And then with the wraparound supportive services. In the issue of Kaka'ako, it's state land. The city is willing to step up and work with the state to do a better job in Kaka'ako enforcing and making sure that the people who are on the sidewalks and streets have a safe place to go. And the good news is today in talking, we have the beginnings of a plan of finding locations where they can be housed in a safe way in an interim period while we have time to find permanent supportive housing, which is a real solution to this problem. We are ready to begin enforcement in a phased way. We've been working with our Honolulu Police Department on an approach that makes sense, that's methodical, that is announced way before action is taken. Working with providers to let people know we're going to be coming into an area in the Kaka'ako area, stage by stage by stage. The good news is working with the state, we see a way where as we begin this process, there will be places for them to move to, while we find the permanent supportive housing. And I really appreciate, again, the governor for bringing us all around the table to help us get to this point. We have a lot more work to do. As the governor mentioned, there's no quick fix. In fact, I believe anyone who says they're going to solve the homeless problem is not being truthful. But I think we're going to do a much better job than we have. Thanks.
The governor mentioned that this is monumental, and it is. The legislature is only in session from January. It's an issue. It is a right step forward, and it's not just the state; it's the county, city and county of Honolulu, and the federal government as well. As we recognize that it really needs to be a community effort. The state can institute sit-lie, or the city can institute sit-lie, but what happens when the jurisdiction cross? So we really need to come together, and the recognition that it cannot be just enforcement, it has to be a combination of services, it has to be providing alternative sites as well. So thank you, Governor.
If I could just add to this, I think what's very clear in all of the discussions that we've been having, and I think a really good first discussion that we had today, is that this issue of homelessness is extremely pervasive. I think we know all of that too well. It's going to be multi-jurisdictional, whether it's amongst all of government, city, county, state, federal, and even within state government. All of our executive branch agencies are impacted. It's not just human services, it's not just health, it's education, it's public safety, it's labor and industrial relations. Every single one of our governor's executive agencies has a role to play, has a responsibility to play to how we help our homeless, how we make sure that we transition into a better way of life for all of our residents and citizens. And that's really why all of us are here, because we understand the gravity of the situation. We know that we need action. This is not a talking group. This is really a working group that's really focused on deliberate, targeted efforts. I think the fact that you have Chair Luke and myself here speaks to the fact of how high a priority this is, and the fact that we do have to look at the kinds of resources that it will take to make sure that we address this thoroughly in all of our communities. This has been a pervasive issue, not just in Kaka'ako, but every single one of our districts. What does that mean? What deliberative actions have to be taken? How can we replicate it? These are the kinds of discussions we're having, and not just as discussions. How can we implement and execute these kinds of solutions as well? And so really commend the governor for the fact that we have been tasked with quite a big responsibility, but I think all of us have really committed ourselves to the responsibility that's going to come with the kinds of actions that need to happen in the next few months, and ultimately will lead to short and long-term changes in both policy and practice, I think, for the state in the months and the years to come. So thank you very much, and I think we're all looking forward to what we're going to be able to do.
Thank you. And we do have Alan Yamamoto representing Senator Hirono. I spoke with her this morning. And Delhan represents Senator Schatz. I spoke with him my last trip to Washington, D.C. I think we all recognize that homelessness is an all-hands-on-deck kind of issue that each and every one of us need to make a focused effort to see how we can move forward. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Governor, getting the leadership together is one thing. The problem seems to be that we can't get all the funding together. There are so many people before you that have come and said, we're going to get the federal money, all the public assistance money, and we're going to put it into one pot, all hands on deck. It's never happened.
Well, housing, permanent housing is an expensive enterprise, and there are many different steps that need to happen in order to construct any kind of shelter. So, I think we all are cognizant. That's why we believe that a sustained effort involving federal, state, and county is our best opportunity to move forward. At the end of the day, we do know that we are tens of thousands of housing units short in the full spectrum of housing, from workforce housing to rental assistance to emergency shelters to assisted. So we definitely understand that the issue is bigger than each individual entity. And only by working together in a focused way can we make a difference. This past session, I do know the city and the mayor has appropriated additional funds for for affordable housing and housing in general, and state legislature had done the same. So yes, there's no immediate or quick answer. It'll be something that we will have to, will require sustained effort over a long duration of time in order to make it.
Governor, this didn't happen overnight,
Yes,
and some people might be
Homelessness.
disappointed that this council is really too little too late when you go down and see what's happening in Kaka'ako and other neighborhoods. I mean, what do you say to people who expected some decision today?
well, all I can tell you is homelessness is a complex issue and there is no immediate or quick answer. You know, anyone who believes that, I think, is fooling themselves. So I can tell you that we are committed on a collective basis, federal, state, and city, to take positive actions. It'll be step by step, week by week, we'll be meeting to make decisions, to identify opportunities for us to make progress, to work through the challenges and the hurdles that are in place. And we will consistently go after this homelessness problem. The challenge and the opportunity, I think, that is represented by Chairs Luke and Tokuda being involved is that we definitely will be able to connect directly if legislation or funding is required in the next session. Most importantly, they're very tenacious partners in this, in the sense that they've committed to help us work through this. And I believe that their participation is helpful for us to move forward. And likewise, on the county side, you know, as the mayor said, enforcement alone, we do know what happens when we enforce with no place for them to go. So we want to be smart about deployment of our resources. We do know that I understand when the mayor takes action, if it's not coordinated with state activity, then it's less effective. So we're committed to working together to share thoughts about how best to move forward, and then working forward in a coordinated fashion.
Can you talk about the mechanics of the committee? What are the expectations? Are there deadlines? How often will they meet?
Well, we do expect to be meeting weekly. We expect to be making announcements as we come to decisions that make sense. You know, we are exploring assets on the state level, as well as I know that the mayor has been working at this a lot longer than I have. You know, we are looking at how we can coordinate enforcement, for example. Mayor talked about the fact in Kaka'ako is specifically a challenge because of the jurisdictions involved. And we definitely are coordinating enforcement on that level. And then most importantly, I think we are looking at other sites that could be identified, and then working with service providers to make sure that we can be prepared as we enforce to move people who want to be moved to someplace that would be more workable.
So new things could happen before the next session begins.
Oh, absolutely. This is certainly something that we're talking about working through on a weekly basis, not something that will wait to next session.
So Governor, when can we expect, when can we
Coordinator
expect?
isn't here, but Colin Kippen, we understand, has been told that he will not be kept on after this week. Can you address that and what are your plans?
Yes, we are looking and have been making a decision about how best to move forward. We are in search of a new homeless coordinator. We are in the process of interviewing, and I think as we make a decision, we'll make an announcement on who the state homeless coordinator will be.
So Governor, when can we expect Kaka'ako to be cleaned up?
You know, there's no magic answer. There's no deadline. I mean, you know, we can, you know, talk about it, but the reality is Kaka'ako will not be cleaned up until there's a place for the homeless people to go to. I mean, that's the reality.
So there's no timeline to find a site or?
No, I mean, we are working as quickly as we can. As you know, Anything in the 100-foot setback along the ocean requires all kinds of permitting approvals. If that's required, we do understand and we'll be working through those issues.
But taking something out of the lingo administration playbook, where she declared a state emergency for public health and safety, bypassed all the permitting, bypassed all the whatever they needed to set up a temporary shelter. Can't you do that?
You know, there are lots of things that can be done. I think the most important message today is that the leadership team will be looking at all of those. If there is a specific plan or site that we identify that we can see what approvals are required and it makes sense for us to seek an emergency declaration, then we will do that. You know, I don't think it's helpful to talk about it until we actually have a specific site or a specific need.
Governor, so is there anything definitive that you can tell us today as it applies to taking action to address the issue of homelessness?
Yes, I can tell you that the state and federal and county government is working together. This leadership team has committed to work together to identify challenges and opportunities. And as we make decisions, we'll be informing all of you.
So last week, the managing director told the council that plan was going to be forthwith in 30 days, and one of our competitors has been saying there's a 2 to 4 week deadline to clear out. Does any of that remotely possible?
There's no firm commitment to, you know, a specific deadline. Sorry, you know, we don't, you know, we will be working as quickly as we can, but as I said before, we do understand if we enforce with nowhere for the homeless to go, they'll just be displaced until they can find someplace else to settle that somebody won't harass them at. And, you know, we don't believe that it makes sense for us to be aggressively enforcing without having service providers lined up or a site or a facility identified.
Is there a commitment to spend enough money that more shelters can be built, especially for families? There are so many families in Kaka'ako.
I think there's definite agreement that families and children should be a priority. I think all of us agree that seeing the children and seeing the families in the homeless encampments, that is the focus, that is the priority. We are looking for identifying shelter and spaces for children and family first.
So is that collectively now a new priority? Because I know that with the city and county, they've talked about under the housing first, what they've been doing is they've actually prioritized those who have the greatest need, which are usually single individuals who are dealing with some sort of substance, drug, or mental health issues, and not families who maybe miss that $100.
So, you know,
Yeah.
if I could just interject in here, you know,
Sure.
one thing I know I would love to take away from this experience, and I'm really looking forward to it because I love interim work. I was a former ed chair, so that's homework in the interim, is if, especially from the money committee's perspective, if we can really identify a couple of key communities where we've got encampments like Kaka'ako, which is probably the most well-known, and really be able to take a look at how can we create some models of best practice that we can best serve those particular communities. I think Kaka'ako provides us with a really great opportunity in the sense that it has a very diverse cohort of individuals. In Kaka'ako, it has both families, as we've seen, which is very difficult to see, but it also has dual diagnosis individuals, single individuals, highest need, as you mentioned, in there as well. It has individuals who maybe will never want services, no rules, no structure, no laws. We may never be able to provide them with shelters. And there may be some that need some treatment options. It's got a range. So it's going to provide us, if we were to take a look at that, for example, as one cohort of individuals to provide support with a great opportunity to decide how can we best provide them with supports. Could an expansion of next shelter, like someone mentioned, I think, be an answer? Possibly, but it would not be the only answer. I think one thing the governor has made very clear is just like homelessness in general, it's really going to be a range of things to provide a continuum of care for individuals. It's wraparound services, but it's also a range of different services depending on the kinds of individuals that are in the community. They're not all going to go to Next Step Shelter. They're not all going to go to an individual where they can stay with rules. They're going to need different things. And that's really what it's about, is making sure that as we move forward in this process, we have those types of options that first and foremost make sure that we keep people safe themselves and the community, and we are law abiding, and that we provide that compassionate support and care as well. And again, I think for us as lawmakers, the really unique opportunity to see what kind of resources does it take to be able to do something like this in a community. Should we need to, and we will need to, replicate this in communities across the state where we know it is a very pervasive problem. All of our communities have this issue to some degree or another. And that, I think, is the real gem and opportunity in a leadership team like this, is the ability to see what does it take to service individuals and support individuals in these high need populations with a diversity of needs, and how can we then replicate them in different communities based upon the kinds of infrastructure and supports that they have. And I think that's my understanding is the task that we've been given, is to really identify a couple of these key communities and really try to see what kind of models and of best practice can we implement and execute even before next session, so that we can understand the kinds of resources that we'll have to prioritize, which will be difficult. Again, which is again why we're at the table, to understand what that's going to mean if we have to make those tough decisions. So I think that's a long answer to your question, but ultimately it's going to be, I think, a range of options that we'll need to provide people in order to provide adequate housing. It's not just one type of individual.
Is there
Just
gonna
I want to address Maleka's question and Dan. So we're not backing off from our commitment to tackle the most difficult problem, which is the chronic homeless individuals, men and women who are addicted to drugs or alcohol or have some kind of mental challenge. Though many people don't want to address that group, we are, and in fact, working with IHS, we have housed many of those people in the Waikiki area successfully. And you've covered some of those stories with some of those individuals. And I don't want to give the impression that the city's backing away from that. But with Kaka'ako, we're stepping up and working with the state and the federal government to house the very different groups of people, the Kofa, which are the Micronesian families, 10, 15 strong, from grandma to grandpa to parents to auntie, uncle, and of course, kids. And we want to see those folks find shelter also. So, but I wanted to let you know that we are not backing away from our other commitment. Dan, as far as our managing director statement that we're going to be taking action, that is true. But we are going to work with our state counterparts and our federal counterparts, and we want to take action sooner than later. We know that the encampment in Kaka'ako is growing larger, and we know, as you've covered, that there are more and more activities where the police or the sheriffs have to come in. We don't want that to occur. And so when Roy Amamiya was talking, he was talking about a phased approach. In other words, we wouldn't come in and address the entire area at one time because there's so many people there, but we do it over a number of weeks, probably over a month. And we would go to the least populated areas first and move in to the areas of Olomehane and Ohe last. And we do it working with the media to let people know what we're going to do. We come in beforehand with providers to let them know that we're going to be coming in within a week. And then we work with the providers as we go into enforce. Because our goal is to get them into shelter, of which there is shelter space, maybe not for families so much, but for individual men and women. And our hope is that by going on the outskirts first and then moving in, there will be time, it'll buy us time working with the state to find property that perhaps we could set up an interim location with security, both private security and police, and of course, working with providers.
Thank you for the clarification, because we're all expecting this big, massive one-day sweep.
It would be very hard to do that, and I think the result would not be very productive. So I think it's a more of a phased approach where you can take a slice of people and help them find housing. And as been mentioned many times here this afternoon, the population is very diverse. You have about 20% are Micronesians, Kofa immigrants with families. You have a Polynesian group. You have a Caucasian group. You have individuals and you have families. And it's how do we approach those different groups will make the biggest difference. This will be thought out, methodical, and announced way ahead of time, working with the press to make sure that it's explained to everyone what it is we're doing.
Is there any
Thanks.
consensus that a safe zone is what you're looking at? Temporary?
It's not
Immediate.
really, I guess it depends, and we had a discussion about what's a definition of a safe zone, or, it could be an issue of semantics. We do know that we need to work with the homeless community to identify what their needs, and we want to make sure that as we enforce, We have areas that we can encourage that they go to, that they will receive assessments and services that they may need. So it's working to line up providers that can service those communities and set them up in the locations. And then any location would be short-term and temporary. The main objective is really to place them housing, whether that be a sand island with like some of what the mayor is proposing or other shelters. That's what we are working towards.
What about the option of using those buses again, Evans buses like we tried with High Tide? It worked for a while. Some of those men that were there were kicked out of Next Step Shelter. You're not actually erecting a shelter, you're just bringing in buses. Is that on the table?
Yeah, I think you're talking about Utulandi's bus shelter program. That is not something that's off the table, but I have to say we're looking more closely at container housing like a Sand Island because we think it has a better bang for the buck. You can actually lock doors, right? Part of it is a homeless individual has to want to voluntarily go somewhere. And so if you can provide a secure place where they can sleep at night and leave during the day, lock the door and know their things are safe, that's going to work. Now, bus is a little harder because it's not set up that way. But we have looked at buses. We continue to talk about it, but I have to say it's not our first focus. Our first focus is some kind, for the cityway, some kind of containerized housing. As we talk, as you can see, there's many, many issues that we need to address in order to come up with this comprehensive program. And we're looking for champions. And on the city side, we have found a champion in Frank Doyle. He's right over here. Frank, maybe you can just stand up and just be recognized so they know who you are. Frank Doyle here. He's been with the city for a long time, but he understands how city government works. He also understands state government. And in some ways, I like the fact he's a former Army man, and we look for a doer, a guy who can draw up all the tasks, check the boxes to make sure we do them, so that when we actually implement, they're done in the best possible way possible, so we get the best result. And I know the governor is also looking for a champion on his side, and then the two champions work together to communicate and make sure we're in sync as we go out and deal with issues in Kakako and other parts of this island.
Can you talk about bringing together the two county and state and federal representatives to come together? How hard was that, trying to get the two cultures together?
I think it's really just making an effort. I have always believed that homelessness is such a pervasive and complex issue that each government entity working independently can only do so much. So clearly that was an objective of mine personally. And, I have been working with the mayor on various issues and working with my federal partners and obviously working with the legislature. So it seemed that there would be a benefit for all of us working together in a committee or leadership team that would have all levels of government represented. And I thought that gave us the best opportunity to find success.
But Governor, please understand, for the public, the only difference between a dream and a goal is a goal has a deadline.
Yes.
So we need.
So all I would suggest is stay tuned. We'll be working, and as we make decisions and as we identify parcels that could be potential sites for us to use, we'll be making those announcements. We are coordinating and working on enforcement. We will be working to organize and focus federal, state, and county assets to make an improvement in the homelessness situation.
Governor, what stands in the way of using the lot around the Next Step Shelter for a temporary place for some of those makeshift camps?
Well,
Is the executive order already in place right now, left over from the Governor Lincoln's time?
No, executive orders and emergency declarations only have a 90-day window. So any emergency order can only last for 90 days. It can be extended under specific situations. So the emergency proclamations that were ordered by Governor Lingo and Governor Abercrombie has long expired.
So you envision taking similar action?
We will take appropriate action to really get programs in place. So if there is a specific need on a specific site or a specific suggestion, then we certainly would consider that. There is no specific plan that requires it right now.
How much money is the city and state prepared to commit to housing the people who are unsheltered right now? On any given night, there's 550 empty beds, but there's also about 2,000 unsheltered people here. I mean, that's a big gap. How are you committed to?
Well, we have, as you know, the budget processes in both the state and city are already done and the budgets have been defined. So we are looking at what resources have already been appropriated that we can put into this effort. And that's where we start with. And as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons I asked Chair Luke and Chair Tokuda to be involved is so that they are aware and have firsthand experience at the complexity and issues dealing with homelessness. And we hope to develop best practices to address different situations and hopefully would be lessons learned that we could apply statewide.
As the committee meets, are activities that are already scheduled going to continue? For instance, next month, your Department of Transportation is going to spend 300 grand cleaning up areas that they fully admit is not going to solve any problem with this. Are we going to keep doing things like that as the committee meets? And
Yes, we definitely are. I mean, different activities. I know the mayor has a whole program of compassionate disruption that continues to operate every single day.
every day.
That will continue. We are definitely, and we actually are learning from the mayor. We are, I've been talking to the Director of Transportation to ask about what ongoing program can we implement on the state side. As you know, he has been doing homeless sweeps on a scheduled basis, and there may be need to get more structured and frequent in what he's been dealing with. So we definitely hope to be able to take best practices, whether they be from city or state or federal government.
Or they could adjust those programs as you meet.
We probably will be working together. I mean, we do know, and Mayor has experience where their enforcement team goes out and they move to state property that's adjacent or in the vicinity. So we are definitely looking to see how we can better coordinate enforcement as well as service programs.
Question? Governor, thank you very much for addressing a most difficult topic. I have a couple of questions. First of all, one is a comment. The ancient Chinese use a methodology of technology that predates 500, 600, 700 years back. It's called rammed earth, where you pack the earth to the extent that oxygen is escaped from the structure, and then you mixed it either with mochi or you mixed it with fibers of bamboo. These structures have lived and have housed people for thousands of years. At UH Manoa, we have a scholar in architectural department that has worked with UNESCO housing, UNESCO structure, UNESCO housing. And he knows how to do this technology. He's never been approached by the mayor or the governor. That's one question. So how come we're not interfacing with Manoa on persons who have this skill base that could be able to move us into one area of actually sheltering people? Then the other question I have is that at any given time during the time that we have threats of hurricanes or tornadoes, we institute, Mayor, please don't leave. We institute an emergency structure that we use schools to be able to house people. In the mainland, during emergency situations, there are. I think that homelessness is an area that we could either institute the armories that are not being used or the schools that are not being used. Why haven't we done these things?
we certainly, the committee would certainly be willing to entertain any proposal that you might want to make. So sure, clearly if you want to, and I would throw that out to the general public as well. The leadership team will be looking for suggestions or proposals. We'll be generating things that we'll be looking at specifically. And we would welcome input from anyone who has any suggestion about what would allow us to proceed forward on homelessness.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.